Hello Yu-Gi-Oh! Players and welcome to Rethinking Thunder. I'm your host, the RJB0. So today is the video where I talk about Watts. Watts? Yes. Yes, what? Yes, right, just like that. Just like what? Yes, exactly. Exactly what? Just like that. Anyway, I could go on like that for hours, but you want to play Watts. Why would you want to play Watts? Well, clearly you're an eccentric guy who would like to be able to make whatever his move is, totally irregardless of what your opponent's move is, because player interaction actually requires a few too many social skills for you. You like the little things in life, such as making your opponent read your cards, watching as they roll their eyes because they can't really do a whole lot, and then making them really, really salty when they lose. There are a couple ways that you could play Watts. There is, of course, the Hopper Lock, which you are looking at on the screen right now, which basically locks down your opponent's plays unless they have an Abyss Gaius, a Black Rose, a Dark Hole, or, I suppose, a Skill Drain, which is actually rather likely, but that's why the good Lord gave us MST. The Hopper Lock basically keeps your opponent from doing anything at the cost of being extremely slow. But if you don't want to be a totally degenerate dickweed, then there are other ways that you can play the deck. So let's actually talk about the Watt monsters that you're going to use, because let's face it, there's a whole lot of crap running around the deck that almost none of which you're actually going to want to use. So let's start off with Watt Cobra. He's your average guy. He likes hanging out with his friends. He's level 4. Which is basically the most common level in the game. Frickin' everybody's like that. And he enjoys punching his enemies in the face. So that's just a regular thing you do. He's basically the MVP of the deck. He's a social butterfly. He hangs out with all the other Watts. And he basically starts everything off. He's a little bit of a spitfire in that way. Then you've got Watcher F, which is kind of the dick of the group. Because whenever he interacts with a person, well, he's just kind of, they can't do a whole lot. And then you've got your Watt Pheasant, which banishes things on the board, which is kind of fun to get rid of Xyz monsters, but other than that, he doesn't really do a whole lot. Then you've got your Watt Dragonfly, who's basically like Watt Cobra, except he has no personal constitution, and ends up getting destroyed in order to use his effect. The nice thing about him is you don't really have to have any requirements for him to be destroyed. He doesn't have to go to the graveyard, he doesn't have to be destroyed by battle, or by card effect, he just has to be destroyed by your opponent's card, and then you get to special summon any of these guys from your deck. And then there's Hopper, and if you're playing the Hopper Lock, well, you know how this works. And then if you want to be a total weirdo, I suppose you could use Watt Fox in case you have a total boner for Watt Chimera, because it can combine with a Thunder Family monster to put Watt Chimera on the board. So that's pretty much the lineup of Watts that you are ever going to see in a Watt deck. The rest is basically crap. I mean, what the hell is Watt Barracks? Anyway, so the way that you are likely to play Watts if you don't feel like playing Hopper Lock, and I'll make an entire video devoted to the Hopper Lock for those of you sick bastards who want to play that, but really the way you play Watts is it has a lot to do with defending yourself. You want to make sure that your opponent can't really attack your monsters, well, because they're not going to survive. And as long as your opponent keeps putting monsters, actually, as long as your opponent doesn't get rid of your monsters, you can still keep making plays, because no matter how many monsters your opponent puts on the board, you're still going to be able to make your plays, because your monsters attack directly most of the time. For instance, you can use Messenger of Peace, which is Watt Cobra's best friend, to stop your opponent from attacking with their monsters, while your little 1,000 monsters can get underneath the Messenger of Peace and attack them directly, so they can keep building up a field and end up, you know, just doing cool stuff. Messenger of Peace is your first line of defense for this deck. Then you've got things like Threatening Roar and Wabaku, which both keep your monsters from being killed by battle, and then you've got things like My Body as a Shield, which prevent them from being destroyed by card effects. So basically the strategy of the deck is you grab Watt Cobra out of the deck, and you start using him to tutor all the rest of your monsters. You can tutor your Watt Cobra through cards like Dragonfly and Thunder Seahorse, and eventually you're just going to poke your opponent to death. And if you play well enough, you can just keep building up Watt monsters on your field and increase the amount of damage that you do to your opponent by about 1,000 every turn. So if you start off with a Watt Cobra, and then you defend your Watt Cobra, you could put another Watt Cobra on the board and start attacking for 2,000 and a +2. You could put a Giraffe on the board and prevent a Mirror Force, or something like that, and attack them directly, and then get 2 more +2s, and you just keep increasing the amount of damage that you do until you win. However, the biggest problem with Watts right now, the one weakness that they really have, is that their greatest asset, last in the formats where they've been good, is Macrocosmos. Since neither Thunder Seahorse nor Dragonfly needs to go to the graveyard, you can use triple Macrocosmos. You can use that triple compulsory, and you can use a ton of protection cards to make sure that your monsters stay on the board. Unfortunately, Macro is now at 1, which takes away a lot of the power of this deck. However, you can still do the 1 Macro, 1 Fissure thing, and get by pretty well. It's really the back row loss, the monster removal, that hits this deck pretty hard. So you're going to want to max out on things like Mirror Force and D-Prison and all Threatening Roar Wabaku, all those things that can stop your monsters from being killed by your opponent's monsters, because that's basically how this deck works. And until this deck, gains a little more support or gains a macro back, it's pretty much going to stick around as an engine for the Thunder family. But I will get to that in another video. So that is your lineup of Watts. That's how you play them. You put them on the board and you protect them from being killed, and no matter what your opponent does after that, you can just keep making your plays. So it's an extremely independent deck. If these were all women, it would be like a feminist wet dream. Do they have wet dreams? Alright, that's a sexual education class for another video. Anyway, so thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Business Casual. I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why. And then subscribe for more Thunder videos. I'm your host, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.